The scream that tore through the Lucky Star Saloon on that sweltering June evening in 1882 did not come from pain or fear, but from a young woman who had just dropped an entire tray of whiskey glasses when her father announced she would marry Morton Granger, a cattle rancher twice her age with tobacco-stained teeth and wandering hands. Josephine Thorne stood amid the shattered glass, her chest heaving, her green eyes blazing with a fury that made even the roughest cowboys at the bar take a step back. Her auburn hair had come loose from its pins during her shift, cascading over her shoulders in wild waves that matched her spirit. At 22 years old, she had spent the last 8 years serving drinks and dodging groping hands in her father's establishment here in Santa Rosa, New Mexico territory, watching the sun rise and set through the same dusty windows, dreaming of mountains she had never climbed and rivers she had never crossed. "I will not marry him," she said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I would rather die." Her father, Thomas Thorne, a barrel-chested man with graying hair and a face weathered by whiskey and hard living, slammed his meaty fist on the bar. "You will do as I say, girl. Granger is offering good money, and Lord knows we need it. This place is barely staying afloat." "Then sell the saloon," Josephine shot back. "Sell everything, but do not sell me." The patrons had gone quiet, watching the scene unfold with the fascination of men who rarely saw entertainment this good without paying for it. Among them sat a cowboy who had ridden into town just that afternoon, dusty from the trail and looking for nothing more than a hot meal and a cold beer. His name was Vincent Dalton, and he was 25 years old with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that touched his collar, and eyes the color of a storm rolling across the prairie. He had been drifting for 3 years now, ever since his family's ranch in Texas had been foreclosed by the bank, working cattle drives and breaking horses, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. Something about the fire in Josephine's eyes made him sit up straighter. He had seen plenty of saloon girls in his travels, but none who looked at their father with such defiance, none who seemed to contain such barely restrained wildness. She reminded him of a Mustang he had once tried to break, all spirit and fight, beautiful in her refusal to be tamed. Thomas Thorne moved around the bar with surprising speed for a man of his size, grabbing Josephine's arm hard enough to make her wince. "You will go upstairs right now and think about your future. Granger will be here tomorrow evening to discuss the arrangements. Let her go." The words came out before Vincent could stop them, quiet but carrying enough steel to cut through the tension in the room. Every head turned toward him. Thomas's face purpled with rage. "This is none of your concern, stranger. Best you mind your own business." Vincent stood slowly, his hand instinctively moving to rest on the pistol at his hip, not as a threat but as a reminder. He was lean but solid, with the kind of strength that came from years of hard work rather than barroom brawls. "I make it my business when I see a man mistreating a woman, even if that woman is his daughter." "Vincent, do not," Josephine said, and the fact that she somehow knew his name before he had introduced himself made him realize she must have overheard him giving it to the bartender earlier. "This is not your fight." But Vincent had spent 3 years running from everything, drifting like tumbleweeds, and he was tired of it. Tired of watching injustice and doing nothing. Tired of being a coward. "Maybe it is time I made it my fight." Thomas released Josephine's arm and took a step toward Vincent, his hand moving toward the shotgun he kept behind the bar. But before things could escalate further, the saloon doors swung open and Sheriff Coleman walked in, his silver star catching the lamplight. He was an older man with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "Trouble, Thomas?" he asked, his gaze sweeping the room. "No trouble, Sheriff," Thomas said through gritted teeth. "Just a disagreement about family matters." Family matters have a way of becoming town matters when they happen in a public establishment, Sheriff Coleman said. He looked at Josephine, noting the red marks on her arm where her father had grabbed her. "Miss Thorne, are you all right?" Josephine nodded, not trusting her voice. The sheriff then turned his attention to Vincent. "I do not recognize you, son. You new in town?" "Just passing through," Vincent replied. "Was hoping to find work, maybe stay a few weeks. We have got plenty of ranches around here that could use an extra hand. You any good with cattle?" "Good enough." Sheriff Coleman nodded slowly, then looked back at Thomas. "I suggest everyone cools down tonight. Whatever needs discussing can wait until tomorrow when heads are clearer." It was not a suggestion, and everyone in the room knew it. Thomas glared at Vincent but backed down, knowing better than to cross the sheriff. The other patrons slowly returned to their drinks and card games, though the atmosphere remained charged. Josephine hurried upstairs without another word, and Vincent watched her go, catching one last glimpse of those fierce green eyes before she disappeared. He finished his beer in silence, paid his tab, and headed to the boarding house down the street where he had taken a room. But sleep eluded him that night. He kept seeing Josephine's face, the desperation hidden beneath her defiance, the way her hands had trembled even as her voice remained strong. He had met countless women in his travels, but none had affected him quite like this, and he could not explain why. The next morning, Vincent found work at the Double R Ranch just outside Santa Rosa, owned by a weathered rancher named Robert Reynolds, who needed help with his growing herd. The work was hard but familiar, and Vincent threw himself into it, trying to forget about the saloon owner's daughter with fire in her eyes. But Santa Rosa was a small town, and by noon, word had spread about the confrontation at the Lucky Star. "Heard you stood up to Thomas Thorne last night," Robert said as they mended a section of fence in the blistering heat. "That took guts or stupidity. Not sure which." "Maybe both," Vincent admitted, driving a post into the hard ground. "Thomas is not a man to cross. He has got connections in this town, favors owed, and Morton Granger is worse. Mean bastard who thinks money can buy anything, including respect." Robert paused in his work, wiping sweat from his brow. "That daughter of his, though, Miss Josephine, she is something else. Smart as a whip, that one. She practically runs the Lucky Star, handles all the books and ordering. Thomas would drink himself into debt without her." "Then why would he force her to marry Granger?" Vincent asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Because Thomas gambled away most of his savings last winter. He owes money all over town, and Granger offered to clear his debts in exchange for Josephine. It is an old story, son. Men treating their daughters like property to settle their mistakes." Vincent's jaw tightened. His own father had been many things, a hard man with rough edges, but he had loved Vincent's mother with a devotion that bordered on worship, and he had raised his son to believe that women deserved respect and protection, not subjugation. "Someone should stop it," Vincent said quietly. "And who would that be?" "The sheriff. He is a good man, but he cannot interfere in legal arrangements between families. Granger has not broken any laws, and unless Josephine runs away, there is nothing anyone can do." Robert gave Vincent a knowing look. "And even if she did run, where would she go? A woman alone out here without money or protection, that is a death sentence." Vincent said nothing, but the wheels in his mind were already turning. He worked through the afternoon, his body moving on instinct while his thoughts churned. He barely knew Josephine Thorne, had exchanged only a handful of words with her, yet he could not shake the feeling that their paths had crossed for a reason. He had spent 3 years drifting, running from responsibility and commitment, but maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting for something that mattered. That evening, instead of heading back to the boarding house, Vincent made his way to the Lucky Star Saloon. It was busier than the night before, filled with cowboys fresh off the trail and locals looking to forget their troubles in whiskey and cards. Vincent spotted Josephine immediately, moving between tables with practiced efficiency, her face a careful mask of politeness that did not quite reach her eyes. He took a seat at the bar and waited. Eventually she came over, and up close he could see the dark circles under her eyes, evidence of a sleepless night that matched his own. "What can I get you?" she asked, her voice professional but weary. "Just a beer," Vincent said, "and maybe a few minutes of your time." Josephine glanced around nervously. Her father was at the far end of the saloon, deep in conversation with Morton Granger, a thick-set man with cold eyes and a cruel mouth. "I cannot talk now. My father is watching. Then meet me later, after your shift. There is a livery stable 2 streets over." "I will wait there." "Why would I do that? I do not even know you." "Because you want to escape and I can help you," Vincent said, his voice low and urgent. "I saw it in your eyes yesterday. You are looking for a way out and I am offering one." Josephine stared at him for a long moment, searching his face for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she gave a barely perceptible nod. "Midnight. But if this is some kind of trick, I swear I will shoot you myself." "Fair enough," Vincent said with a small smile. The hours until midnight crawled by with agonizing slowness. Vincent returned to the boarding house, gathered his few belongings, and settled his account with the landlady. He stopped by the general store and purchased supplies: dried beef, hardtack, coffee, matches, ammunition, and 2 bedrolls. Whatever they were going to do, wherever they were going to go, they would need to be prepared for a hard journey. At the livery stable, he saddled his horse, a sturdy buckskin gelding named Dusty, and prepared a second horse, a gentle mare that the stable owner agreed to sell him at a fair price. He waited in the shadows, watching the stars wheel overhead, wondering if Josephine would actually come or if fear would keep her trapped in the life she knew. Just when he was beginning to think she had changed her mind, he heard soft footsteps on the packed dirt. Josephine emerged from the darkness, dressed in a simple traveling dress with a small bag clutched in her hands. Her hair was braided down her back, and in the moonlight, she looked younger, more vulnerable than she had in the harsh lamplight of the saloon. "I cannot believe I am doing this," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder as if expecting her father to appear at any moment. "Are you sure?" Vincent asked, giving her one last chance to back out. "Once we leave, there is no going back. Your father will come after us, and so will Granger." "I know. I have been thinking about escape for years, but I never had the courage. And then you walked into the saloon and something changed. I do not know if it was fate or desperation, but I know I cannot marry Morton Granger. I cannot spend the rest of my life in this town, serving drinks and watching my dreams die a little more each day." Vincent held out his hand to her. "Then let us go make those dreams a reality." Josephine took his hand, and he helped her mount the mare. The touch of her fingers against his sent an unexpected jolt through him, something electric and alive. He swung up onto Dusty, and together they rode out of Santa Rosa under the cover of darkness, heading north toward the mountains that rose like sentinels against the star-filled sky. They rode hard for the first few hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and the town. Vincent knew that by morning, Thomas Thorne would discover his daughter missing, and the hunt would begin. But the night was their ally, and Vincent knew these lands well enough from his years of drifting to find paths that would be difficult to track. As dawn began to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold, they stopped beside a small creek to rest the horses and catch their breath. Josephine slid from the saddle with a groan, her legs unsteady after so many hours of riding. "I have never ridden that far in my entire life," she admitted, stretching her sore muscles. "You did well," Vincent said, leading the horses to the water. "We will rest here for an hour, then keep moving. We need to stay ahead of anyone who might be following." Josephine sat on a flat rock by the creek, splashing cool water on her face. In the growing light, Vincent could see her more clearly. The delicate bone structure of her face, the determined set of her jaw, the way her eyes reflected the endless sky. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was an intelligence and strength in her that drew him like a moth to flame. "Where are we going?" she asked, breaking the silence. "North, into Colorado. I know a place up in the mountains, a valley where a friend of mine has a small ranch. We can stay there until things cool down, figure out what comes next. And what if my father finds us? What if he brings the law?" Vincent sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Legally, you are an adult. He cannot force you to go back. The problem is Granger and any men he might hire to track us down, but we will deal with that when we have to." Josephine was quiet for a moment, then said, "I do not even know why you are doing this. You could have just ridden on, forgotten about me. Why risk your life for a stranger?" It was a good question, one Vincent had been asking himself since he had first opened his mouth in that saloon. "I have spent the last 3 years running from everything, never standing up for anything that mattered. I watched my family lose everything because I was not strong enough or smart enough to help. I have been a coward, and I am tired of it. When I saw you yesterday, fighting for your freedom, I saw a chance to finally do something right, something that matters." "You are not a coward," Josephine said softly. "A coward would not have stood up to my father. A coward would not be here right now." Their eyes met, and Vincent felt something shift between them, a connection that went deeper than circumstance or necessity. He looked away first, standing and moving to check on the horses, suddenly aware of how close they had been sitting, how easy it would be to let himself feel more than he should for this woman he barely knew. They rode on as the sun climbed higher, following game trails and dry creek beds that would hide their tracks. The landscape changed gradually as they traveled north, the scrubland giving way to rolling hills covered in juniper and pine. By late afternoon, they had crossed into Colorado territory, though the invisible border offered little comfort. Thomas Thorne's reach might extend beyond New Mexico, especially if he was as connected as Robert Reynolds had suggested. They made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow surrounded by pine trees, far from any established trails. Vincent started a small fire while Josephine tended to the horses, having insisted that she pull her own weight despite her lack of experience. She moved with quick efficiency, learning as she went, and Vincent found himself impressed by her adaptability. As they ate a simple meal of dried beef and hardtack, Josephine told him about her life in Santa Rosa. How her mother had died when she was 14, leaving her alone with a father who saw her as little more than unpaid labor. How she had taught herself to read and write by studying the newspapers that customers left behind. How she had dreamed of seeing the ocean or walking through a city with buildings taller than 2 stories. "I used to stand on the balcony of the saloon and watch the trains pass through town," she said, staring into the fire. "All those people going somewhere, anywhere, and I was stuck in the same place, day after day. I felt like I was suffocating." "You are not stuck anymore," Vincent said. "No, but I do not know what comes next. I have no money, no skills beyond pouring drinks and keeping books. What kind of future can I build?" Vincent leaned forward, his expression serious. "You are smart, adaptable, and braver than most men I know. You will figure it out." We will figure it out together." The word "together" hung in the air between them, carrying implications neither was quite ready to examine. Josephine looked at him across the firelight, and Vincent saw something shift in her expression, a softening around her eyes, a question forming that she was not yet ready to ask. "Tell me about you," she said instead. "Where are you from? What made you start drifting?" So Vincent told her about his family's ranch in Texas, about his father's pride and his mother's gentle strength. He told her about the drought that had devastated their land, the loans they had taken that they could not repay, and the cold day when the bank had foreclosed and left them with nothing. His parents had moved to San Antonio to live with his mother's sister, broken by the loss of the land they had worked for 30 years. Vincent had been 22, angry and ashamed, and he had ridden away promising to send money to somehow make things right. "But I never did," he said quietly. "I sent what I could, but it was never enough. My father died 2 years ago, still heartbroken over losing the ranch. I was not even there. I was working a cattle drive in Wyoming when I got the letter. By the time I made it back to Texas, he was already buried." "I am sorry," Josephine said, and the genuine compassion in her voice made Vincent's chest tighten. "I told myself I was drifting to find opportunities, to make money and build something new. But really, I was just running from my failure, from my guilt." Josephine moved around the fire and sat beside him, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. "You cannot blame yourself for circumstances beyond your control. The drought, the banks, those were not your fault." "Maybe not, but I could have fought harder. I could have been stronger." "You are being strong now," she said, placing her hand on his arm. The touch was innocent, meant only as comfort, but Vincent felt it burn through the fabric of his shirt like a brand. "You are helping me when you did not have to. That takes courage." Vincent looked down at her hand on his arm, then up at her face, so close now that he could count the freckles across her nose, see the gold flecks in her green eyes. The urge to kiss her was almost overwhelming, but he held back, knowing it was too soon, that she had just escaped one man trying to control her life and did not need another complicating things. But Josephine did not move away. Instead, she leaned closer, her eyes searching his face. "Vincent," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his heart race. "Josephine, we should not," he started to say, but she silenced him by pressing her fingers to his lips. "I know this is crazy. I know we barely know each other. But I have never felt this way before, like I can finally breathe, like I am finally alive. Is that wrong?" "No," Vincent said, his voice rough. "It is not wrong." This time when their eyes met, neither looked away. Vincent cupped her face gently in his calloused hands, giving her time to pull back if she wanted to. Instead, she closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that started tentative and uncertain but quickly deepened into something more urgent, more real. Vincent had kissed women before, had even fancied himself in love once or twice, but nothing had prepared him for the feeling of Josephine in his arms, the taste of her lips, the soft sound she made when he pulled her closer. It felt like coming home after years of wandering, like finding something he had not even known he was searching for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Josephine rested her forehead against his. "What are we doing?" she asked, half laughing, half crying. "I do not know," Vincent admitted, "but it feels right." They held each other in the firelight, not speaking, just existing in the moment. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with them, and they settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, propriety still winning out over desire. But before Vincent fell asleep, he heard Josephine's soft voice across the darkness. "Thank you for giving me a chance at freedom." "Thank you for giving me a reason to stop running," he replied. The next morning brought storm clouds rolling in from the west, dark and heavy with rain. They broke camp quickly and continued north, pushing the horses as hard as they dared. By midday, the rain arrived in earnest, a cold, driving downpour that soaked them to the skin and turned the trails to mud. They took shelter under an overhang of rock, huddling together for warmth while the storm raged around them. Vincent built a small fire using dry kindling he had kept wrapped in oilcloth, and they changed into dry clothes from their packs, turning their backs to each other to preserve modesty, even as the situation made such gestures almost absurd. "How much farther to your friend's ranch?" Josephine asked, her teeth chattering despite the fire. "Another 2 days if the weather clears, maybe 3 in these conditions." Vincent wrapped his blanket around her shoulders, adding it to her own. "Are you all right? You are shaking." "I am fine, just cold." But her face was pale, and Vincent worried that she might be getting sick. The change from the warm saloon to long days in the saddle followed by cold rain could break down even the hardiest constitution, and for all her courage, Josephine had lived a sheltered life. He moved closer, wrapping his arms around her and pulling her against his chest. "We need to share body heat. It is the best way to stay warm." Josephine did not protest, instead burrowing into his embrace with a sigh of relief. Vincent held her close, rubbing her arms to help circulation, feeling her gradually stop shivering. The intimacy of their position was not lost on him, but necessity overrode propriety, and soon Josephine's breathing deepened as exhaustion pulled her into sleep. Vincent stayed awake, keeping the fire going and watching the storm, his arms never leaving Josephine. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the mountains like the drums of war, and Vincent found himself praying to a god he had stopped talking to years ago. Praying that they would make it to safety, that Josephine would stay healthy, that Thomas Thorne would give up the chase and let his daughter go. But Vincent was not naive enough to believe that prayers alone would keep them safe. He checked his pistol, making sure it was clean and loaded, knowing that the time might come when he would have to use it. The storm passed by nightfall, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of pine and wet earth. Josephine woke to find herself still in Vincent's arms, and she looked up at him with an expression so tender it made his heart ache. "You stayed with me the whole time," she said. "Where else would I be?" Vincent replied, brushing a damp strand of hair from her face. They ate a cold supper, not wanting to risk a large fire that might be seen, then settled in for the night. This time, without discussion, they arranged their bedrolls together, lying side by side under the stars that peeked through the breaking clouds. Vincent took Josephine's hand in his, lacing their fingers together, and she squeezed back, a silent conversation passing between them. "I am falling for you," Josephine whispered into the darkness. "I know it is too soon, that we barely know each other, but I cannot help it." Vincent's heart pounded so hard he was sure she must be able to hear it. "I am falling for you too. Have been since I first saw you standing in that broken glass, refusing to let your father break your spirit. What does that mean for us? Where does this go?" "I do not know," Vincent admitted. "But I know I want to find out, if you will give me the chance." Josephine rolled onto her side to face him, and even in the darkness her eyes shone. "I ran away from one man who wanted to control me. I do not want to end up trapped again, even by someone I care about." "I do not want to control you," Vincent said fiercely. "I want to see you fly. Whatever dreams you have, whatever you want to do with your freedom, I want to help you achieve it, even if that means letting you go." Tears spilled down Josephine's cheeks, and she leaned forward to kiss him, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I do not want you to let me go. I want you to stay with me, but as a partner, not a keeper." "Partners," Vincent agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. They rode into the valley 2 days later, following a narrow trail that wound through stands of aspen and pine. The ranch sat in a natural bowl surrounded by mountains, with a clear stream running through the property and meadows full of wildflowers. It was smaller than Vincent's family ranch had been, but well maintained, with a sturdy log cabin and several outbuildings. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, rifle in hand but lowered when he recognized Vincent. Jack Morrison was in his 40s, lean and weathered, with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard. He and Vincent had worked cattle together in Wyoming, and Jack had saved Vincent's life when a spooked steer had nearly trampled him. "Vincent Dalton," Jack said, breaking into a grin. "I will be damned. Did not expect to see you up this way." "Jack," Vincent said, swinging down from his saddle, "I need a favor, and it is a big one." Jack's eyes moved to Josephine, taking in her exhausted face and travel-worn clothes, missing nothing. "Why do not you both come inside and tell me about it over hot food and coffee?" Inside the cabin, Jack's wife, Mary, a plump woman with a warm smile and flour on her hands, fussed over Josephine like a mother hen, getting her into dry clothes and settled by the fire. Over a meal of venison stew and fresh bread, Vincent and Josephine told their story, leaving nothing out. Jack and Mary listened without interruption, their expressions growing more serious as the tale unfolded. When Vincent finished, Jack leaned back in his chair and let out a long breath. "You have gotten yourself into quite a situation," he said. "This Thomas Thorne, he sounds like the kind of man who will not give up easy, and if he has got connections and money, he could make real trouble for you both." "I know," Vincent said, "but I could not leave her there. And I have got nowhere else to go." "We are not turning you away," Mary said quickly, putting a reassuring hand on Josephine's shoulder. "You are both welcome here as long as you need, but we need to be smart about this. If men come looking, we need a story ready." "What if we said you are married?" Jack suggested, looking between Vincent and Josephine. "That Josephine is Vincent's wife, and you are here to help me with the ranch for the season. That gives you legitimacy and makes it harder for Thomas to claim you ran away." Josephine's eyes widened. "But we are not married." "No, but who is to say otherwise?" Mary said. "You would not be the first couple to claim a marriage without the paperwork, especially out here. And if you wanted to make it real later, when things are settled, you could." Vincent looked at Josephine, trying to read her expression. They had been running for nearly a week, growing closer with each passing day, but marriage was a serious step, even if it was just for show at first. "What do you think?" he asked her softly. Josephine bit her lip, considering. "It would give us protection and make it easier to explain my presence here. But Vincent, I do not want you to feel trapped into something you do not want." "You are not trapping me," Vincent said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "If anything, you are setting me free. I have been lost for 3 years and then I found you. If pretending to be your husband keeps you safe, I will do it gladly. And maybe someday, if you want, we can make it real." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes, but she was smiling. "All right, we will say we are married." They settled into life on Jack's ranch with surprising ease. Vincent worked alongside Jack, mending fences, tending cattle, and preparing for winter. Josephine helped Mary with the household, learning to cook and garden and do all the things she had never had time to learn in the saloon. But she was also more than that. Her skills with numbers proved invaluable when Jack needed help with his books, and her sharp mind caught inefficiencies in their operations that even Jack had missed. "You have got a real treasure there," Jack told Vincent one afternoon as they worked on building a new chicken coop. "That woman of yours is smart as a whip." "She is not really mine," Vincent said, though the words felt increasingly untrue. He and Josephine shared Jack and Mary's guest room, sleeping in the same bed though they had not yet consummated their fake marriage, both aware that the final step would change everything. "Maybe not on paper," Jack said with a knowing look, "but I have seen the way you look at each other." "That is real, Vincent. Do not be a fool and let it slip away because you are scared." Vincent could not argue with that. Every day he fell a little more in love with Josephine. With her quick laugh and quicker mind, with the way she threw herself into learning new things, with the quiet strength that had carried her through everything. She was sunlight breaking through clouds, and he was a man who had been walking in darkness for far too long. One evening, about 3 weeks after their arrival, Vincent and Josephine took a walk along the stream that ran through the property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the air was warm with the promise of summer. "I love it here," Josephine said, stopping to skip a stone across the water. "I never knew life could be this peaceful." "You are happy then?" Vincent asked. "Happier than I have ever been, but also terrified that it will end, that my father will find us and drag me back." Vincent pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I will never let that happen. I will protect you with my last breath if I have to." Josephine turned in his arms, looking up at him with an expression that made his breath catch. "I know you would. That is why I trust you. That is why I love you." The words hung in the air between them, more real than anything Vincent had ever heard. "You love me," he whispered. "Yes," Josephine said simply. "I think I started falling for you the moment you stood up to my father, and every day since then I have fallen a little more. I love you, Vincent Dalton, and I want to make this real. I want to be your wife in truth, not just in name." Vincent's answer was a kiss that spoke of all the longing and desire he had been holding back for weeks. Josephine responded with equal fervor, pressing against him with an urgency that matched his own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Really marry me. Let us go to town tomorrow and find a preacher and make this official." "Yes," Josephine laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They went to Jack and Mary with the news, and Mary cried with joy while Jack slapped Vincent on the back hard enough to bruise. The next morning, all 4 of them rode into the nearby town of Telluride, Colorado, where a circuit preacher happened to be passing through. By noon, Vincent and Josephine were married in a small church with Jack and Mary standing as witnesses, Josephine wearing a simple blue dress that Mary had sewn for the occasion, and Vincent in his best shirt with his hair slicked back and his boots polished. The ceremony was short but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Josephine with a joy he had not felt since, before his family lost the ranch. This was a new beginning, a chance to build something real and lasting with a woman who had stolen his heart in the space of a single glance. That night, back at the ranch, Jack and Mary discreetly retired early, leaving Vincent and Josephine alone in their room. There was an awkward moment as they both stood by the bed, suddenly shy despite all they had been through together. "I have never done this before," Josephine admitted, her cheeks flushing pink. "In case you were wondering." "Neither have I," Vincent said, which surprised her. "There were opportunities, but I never wanted it to be casual. I always thought I would wait until I found someone worth waiting for." Josephine stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest. "Was I worth waiting for?" "Yes," Vincent said fervently. "You are worth everything." What followed was tender and sweet. 2 people learning each other with gentle hands and whispered words, building a connection that went beyond physical pleasure into something deeper, more profound. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, Josephine's head on Vincent's chest, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never thought I could be this happy," Josephine murmured. "3 months ago I was trapped in that saloon, convinced I would die there. And now I am here, married to a man I love, free to build whatever life I want." "What kind of life do you want?" Vincent asked, genuinely curious. Josephine was quiet for a moment, thinking. "I want to learn everything I can. I want to read books and understand how the world works. I want to build something meaningful, maybe help other women who are trapped like I was. And I want children someday, when we are ready. A family built on love instead of obligation." "That sounds perfect," Vincent said, kissing the top of her head. "We will make it happen. Whatever you need, whatever you dream, I will help you achieve it." The peaceful summer weeks stretched into months. Vincent and Josephine worked hard alongside Jack and Mary, earning their keep and then some. They made plans to eventually start their own small ranch nearby, saving every penny they earned. Jack helped Vincent select a promising piece of land with water rights and good grazing, and they began the slow work of building a cabin. But the shadow of Thomas Thorne still loomed over their happiness. Vincent knew it was only a matter of time before someone came looking, and he made sure his rifle was always clean and his pistol loaded. The confrontation came on a crisp October morning when the aspens had turned gold and the air smelled of approaching winter. Vincent was working on the cabin when Jack came riding up fast, his face grim. "4 riders heading this way," Jack said. "Armed and asking questions in town about a runaway girl and the cowboy who took her." Vincent's blood ran cold. "Get Josephine and Mary into the root cellar. Now." But Josephine came running from the main house before Jack could move, having overheard. "No, I am not hiding. This is my fight too." "Josephine, please," Vincent said, grabbing her shoulders. "These men might be dangerous." "Then we face them together," she said stubbornly. "I am done running and hiding. I am your wife, and I stand with you." Vincent wanted to argue, but he saw the determination in her eyes and knew it would be pointless. Instead, he made her promise to stay behind him, and together they waited as the riders appeared on the ridge. Thomas Thorne rode at the front, his face red with rage even from a distance. Beside him was Morton Granger, looking smug and confident. The other 2 men were hired guns. That much was obvious from their hard eyes and the way they wore their weapons. "Josephine." Thomas bellowed as they rode into the yard. "Get over here right now. This foolishness ends today." Josephine stepped forward and Vincent moved with her, his hand resting on his pistol. Jack stood to their left, rifle held casually but ready. Mary had not gone to the cellar either, instead standing on the porch with a shotgun that she handled with comfortable familiarity. "I am not going anywhere with you, Father," Josephine said, her voice steady. "I am a married woman now. Vincent is my husband and this is my home." Thomas's face purpled further. "That is not a real marriage. You are coming back to Santa Rosa to fulfill your obligations to Mr. Granger." "The marriage is real and legal," Vincent said, pulling the certificate from his pocket. "Performed by Preacher Davidson in Telluride and witnessed. Your daughter is my wife and she is staying here." Granger leaned forward in his saddle, his eyes cold. "I paid good money for that girl. I've got a contract with her father and I intend to collect." "You cannot buy a person," Josephine said, her voice ringing with fury. "I am not property to be traded. I am a human being with rights and I choose to be here with my husband." "The law might see it differently," one of the hired guns said. "Breach of contract is a serious matter." "What contract?" Jack spoke up. "A verbal agreement between 2 men about a woman's future. That holds no legal weight, especially since the woman in question is now married to someone else." Thomas climbed down from his horse, and Vincent tensed, ready for violence. But Thomas surprised him by looking past Vincent to Josephine, and for just a moment his anger cracked to reveal something that might have been pain. "You are my daughter," he said, his voice breaking. "All I have left of your mother. Come home, Josie. We can figure this out." Josephine's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained firm. "You stopped being a father when you tried to sell me to pay your debts. I loved you once, but you broke that when you chose gambling and whiskey over your own daughter. I have a new family now, people who value me for who I am, not what I can provide. I am sorry, Father, but I am not coming back." Thomas looked like he had been struck. He turned to Granger, who had dismounted and was walking toward Josephine with clear intent. Vincent stepped in front of his wife, his hand moving to his pistol. "That is far enough," Vincent said quietly, but with enough steel to stop Granger in his tracks. "I will not be cheated," Granger snarled. "I paid good money, and I will have what I bought, contract or no contract." "The lady is not for sale," Vincent said. "Now I suggest you all turn around and ride back to New Mexico before this gets ugly." One of the hired guns went for his weapon, and several things happened at once. Vincent drew and fired, his bullet taking the man in the shoulder before he could fully clear leather. Jack's rifle cracked, kicking up dirt at the feet of the second hired gun, who immediately raised his hands in surrender. And Mary's shotgun blast over the heads of the horses sent them skittering nervously, forcing Thomas and Granger to fight for control. "The next shot will not be a warning," Jack said calmly, already working the lever on his rifle. Vincent kept his pistol trained on Granger, whose face had gone pale. "You have got two choices," Vincent said. "You can leave peacefully and forget you ever knew Josephine Thorne, or you can try to take her, and I promise you will not leave this valley alive. Your choice." Granger looked at the blood spreading across his hired gun's shirt, at Jack's steady rifle, at Mary's reloaded shotgun, and at the cold determination in Vincent's eyes. Whatever he saw there convinced him that Vincent was not bluffing. "This is not over," Granger said, but he was already backing toward his horse. Thomas looked at his daughter one last time. "Josephine, please. I am sorry. I know I have been a poor father, but it does not have to end like this." Josephine stepped around Vincent, her face wet with tears but her spine straight. "It already ended, Father. It ended when you grabbed my arm and told me I had no choice in my own life. I hope you find peace, truly I do, but find it somewhere else, because you are not welcome in my life anymore." Thomas nodded slowly, looking older and more defeated than Vincent had ever seen him. He mounted his horse without another word, and the four men rode away, the wounded hired gun slumped in his saddle but able to ride. They watched until the riders disappeared over the ridge, and only then did Vincent lower his pistol. Josephine turned and threw her arms around him, sobbing into his chest. Vincent held her tight, feeling her body shake with the release of months of tension and fear. Jack and Mary tactfully retreated to the house, giving them privacy. "It is over," Vincent murmured into her hair. "They are gone and they will not be back. You are safe now. We are safe." "I know," Josephine said, pulling back to look up at him. "I know, and I should feel relieved, but I just feel sad. He was my father once. He was not always like this." "I know," Vincent said, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "And it is all right to grieve for what was lost, but you made the right choice. You chose yourself, your freedom, your future. That took courage." "I chose you," Josephine corrected. "And I would make that choice 1,000 times over." They stood there in the autumn sunlight, holding each other, letting the weight of the past finally slip away. The confrontation they had both dreaded was over, and they had emerged together, stronger for it. That winter was hard but happy. The cabin Vincent and Josephine were building was finished just before the first major snowfall. a cozy two-room structure with a stone fireplace and windows that looked out over the valley. They moved in just after Thanksgiving, spending their first Christmas as a married couple in their own home. Mary taught Josephine to cook hearty winter meals and preserve food for the lean months. Jack taught Vincent advanced techniques for managing cattle in harsh weather. But mostly, Vincent and Josephine learned to be married, to navigate the small disagreements and compromises that came with building a life together. They learned that Josephine was an early riser who liked to watch the sunrise with coffee, while Vincent preferred to sleep until the last possible moment. They learned that Vincent got quiet when he was upset, retreating into himself, while Josephine needed to talk things through. They learned to laugh at their mistakes and forgive each other's flaws. And they learned the deep contentment that came from lying in each other's arms on cold winter nights, the wind howling outside while they stayed warm beneath layers of quilts, talking about their dreams for the spring. "I want to start a school," Josephine said one night in February, her head pillowed on Vincent's shoulder. "There are families scattered all through these valleys, and their children have no access to education. I could teach them to read and write, do arithmetic. Give them opportunities I never had." "That is a wonderful idea," Vincent said, meaning it. "We could build a schoolhouse come spring, something small to start. I will help however I can. You do not think it is foolish, me teaching when I barely had any education myself?" Vincent rolled onto his side to face her, his expression serious in the firelight. "You are one of the smartest people I know. You taught yourself to read, you handle numbers better than most bankers, and you have got a gift for explaining things in ways people can understand. Those children would be lucky to have you as a teacher." Josephine kissed him softly. "How did I get so lucky to find you?" "I ask myself the same thing every day," Vincent replied. "Spring came late that year, but when it arrived, it brought an explosion of wildflowers and new beginnings." True to their discussion, Vincent and Jack began work on a small schoolhouse on land donated by another rancher who had 3 children and saw the value in education. Josephine threw herself into preparing lessons and gathering books, writing to charitable organizations back east who sometimes donated materials to frontier schools. Word spread quickly through the valley, and by the time the schoolhouse was ready in May, Josephine had 12 students ranging from age 6 to 15. She taught 6 days a week, while Vincent and Jack worked on building up their small herd of cattle, combining resources to make both ranches more successful. Life fell into a comfortable rhythm. Vincent and Josephine would rise early, working together to handle the morning chores before Josephine left for the school, and Vincent headed out to work the ranch. They would reunite in the evenings, sharing meals and stories about their days, Josephine regaling Vincent with tales of her students' progress, while Vincent told her about the calves being born or the fence he had mended. But the best moments were the quiet ones, sitting on their porch and watching the stars come out, or lying in bed and planning their future. They talked about growing the ranch, about the school, about the family they wanted to build. "I think I am ready," Josephine said one warm June evening, exactly 1 year after she had fled Santa Rosa. They were sitting by the stream, their feet dangling in the cool water, watching the sun set behind the mountains. "Ready for what?" Vincent asked, though he thought he knew. "Ready to start a family, ready to be a mother." Josephine turned to him, her eyes shining. "I spent so long fighting just to survive that I never let myself imagine this kind of happiness. But now I have it and I want to build on it. I want to have your children, Vincent. I want to fill that cabin with love and laughter." Vincent pulled her close, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "I want that too, more than anything." "Then let us start trying," Josephine said with a smile that was equal parts shy and mischievous. Vincent answered by kissing her thoroughly, and they made their way back to the cabin as the stars began to appear, spending the night wrapped up in each other and the promise of the future they were building together. By autumn, Josephine's monthly cycle had stopped, and Mary confirmed what they had both suspected. Josephine was pregnant. The news filled Vincent with a joy so profound it scared him. He had lost so much in his life, had failed so many people, and the thought of being responsible for a child terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "You are going to be a wonderful father," Josephine assured him when she noticed his worry. "You are patient and kind and strong. Our child will be lucky to have you." "I hope you are right," Vincent said, placing his hand on her still flat stomach with a sense of wonder. "I hope I can give them everything I could not give my own family." The pregnancy agreed with Josephine. She glowed with health and happiness, continuing to teach through the fall even as her belly swelled. Her students were delighted by the prospect of their teacher having a baby, and the community rallied around them with gifts of baby clothes and hand-carved toys. Winter came again, and Josephine reluctantly closed the school until spring, spending the cold months preparing for the baby's arrival. Mary was a constant presence, sharing wisdom from her own experiences and helping to sew baby clothes and blankets. Jack and Vincent worked on building a cradle, arguing good-naturedly about the proper joinery technique. Josephine went into labor on a clear March morning when the first crocuses were pushing through the last of the snow. Mary and another ranch wife, Clara Jenkins, attended her while Vincent paced outside like a caged animal, wearing a path in the dirt. "Your woman is strong," Jack said, trying to calm his friend. "She will come through this fine." But Vincent had seen enough of life to know that childbirth was dangerous, that strong women died bringing life into the world every day. He had never prayed so hard in his life as he did during those long hours, bargaining with God, promising anything if Josephine and the baby would both survive. The sun was setting when a baby's cry finally pierced the air, thin and wavering but unmistakably alive. Mary appeared at the door moments later, her face tired but smiling. "You have a son," she said. "A healthy, loud son, and Josephine did wonderfully. She is asking for you." Vincent burst into the cabin to find Josephine propped up in bed, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blue blanket. She looked up as he entered, tears streaming down her face, and Vincent felt his own eyes burn with emotion. "Meet your son," she whispered. Vincent approached slowly, reverently, looking down at the tiny face peeking out from the blanket. The baby had Josephine's nose and what looked like Vincent's dark hair, and he was the most beautiful thing Vincent had ever seen besides his wife. "He is perfect," Vincent breathed, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "You are perfect. I cannot believe we made this." "What should we name him?" Josephine asked. They had discussed names for months, but standing there looking at his son, Vincent knew exactly what the baby's name should be. "James, after my father, James Robert Dalton," Josephine smiled, understanding the significance. "James, I love it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world." Vincent reached out a tentative finger, and the baby's tiny hand wrapped around it with surprising strength. In that moment, Vincent felt something shift inside him, like a door opening that he had not known was closed. All the guilt and pain he had been carrying since his father's death, all the feelings of failure and inadequacy, seemed to lift away. He could not change the past, could not save the family ranch or bring his father back, but he could build something new. He could be the father to James that his own father had been to him. He could break the cycle of loss and create something lasting. "I promise you," Vincent said softly to his son, "that I will give you everything I have. I will teach you to be strong and kind. I will show you how to work hard and love deeply. And I will make sure you always know that you are valued, not for what you can provide, but for who you are." Josephine reached up and cupped Vincent's face, drawing his eyes to hers. "We will give him that together. You and me, partners in everything." "Partners," Vincent agreed, leaning down to kiss her softly. "Now and always." The years that followed were full and rich. Little James grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's intelligence and his father's quiet strength. Josephine returned to teaching when James was old enough, often bringing him to the schoolhouse where he learned alongside the older children. The school grew, eventually requiring a larger building and an assistant teacher. Vincent and Jack's ranches prospered, benefiting from their cooperative approach and the growing demand for beef as more settlers arrived in Colorado. They hired additional hands, good men who Vincent treated fairly and paid well, building loyalty that translated to success. 3 years after James was born, Josephine gave birth to a daughter they named Rose, with her mother's red hair and green eyes. 2 years after that came another son, Thomas, named despite everything for Josephine's father, because she said she wanted to remember the good parts of her childhood, before whiskey and gambling had stolen her father away. The cabin was expanded twice to accommodate their growing family, eventually becoming a proper house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where Josephine presided over family meals that often included Jack and Mary, who had become surrogate grandparents to the Dalton children. Life was not always easy. There were hard winters when they lost cattle, dry summers when the crops struggled, illnesses that scared them and setbacks that tested them. But through it all, Vincent and Josephine faced everything together, their love deepening with each passing year, growing from the passionate intensity of new romance into something more profound and enduring. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Josephine back to the stream where they had sat so many times, where she had told him she was ready to start a family. The children were spending the night with Jack and Mary, giving them a rare evening alone. "You ever regret it?" Vincent asked as they sat with their feet in the water, just as they had a decade before. "Running away with me, giving up the certainty of the saloon for the uncertainty of this life." Josephine laughed, the sound rich and warm. "Not for a single moment. That was not certainty, Vincent. That was a prison. You gave me freedom, real freedom, not just from the saloon but from my own fear. You taught me that I could be more than what others expected, that I could build my own life on my own terms." "We built it together," Vincent corrected. "Yes," Josephine agreed, lacing her fingers through his. "Together. That is the best part. I did not just escape to something, I escaped with someone, with my partner, my love, my best friend." Vincent pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "I spent 3 years drifting, thinking I was searching for something I had lost. But I was not looking for what I had lost. I was looking for what I had not found yet. I was looking for you. And I was standing in that saloon, looking at the stars and dreaming of escape, never imagining that my escape would walk through the door with dust on his boots and hope in his eyes." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. 10 years had passed since that night in Santa Rosa when Josephine had dropped a tray of glasses and Vincent had stood up to a bully. 10 years of hard work and harder lessons, of building a life from nothing but love and determination. "What do you dream about now?" Vincent asked. "Now that you have escaped, now that you are free," Josephine smiled, thinking. "I dream about watching our children grow up strong and kind. I dream about the students who will leave my school and go on to do amazing things because someone taught them to read and think. I dream about growing old with you, watching the sunset from this very spot when we are gray and weathered." "That sounds like a good dream," Vincent said. "What about you? What do you dream about?" Vincent looked at the mountains rising around them, at the ranch they had built with their own hands, at the woman beside him who had given him purpose and meaning. "I dream about exactly this. This moment, this life, this love. I do not need anything else." As the stars began to appear overhead, Vincent and Josephine made their way back to the house, walking hand in hand through the meadow that bloomed with wildflowers. The lights were on in the windows, warm and welcoming, and smoke rose from the chimney into the clear night sky. This was home. Not just a place, but a feeling, a promise, a dream made reality. Josephine had wanted escape and Vincent had made it happen. But what they had found was so much more than freedom from something. They had found freedom to something, to build, to love, to become more than they had ever imagined they could be. And as they stepped through the door into the warmth of their home, into the life they had created together, both of them knew that the best dreams were not the ones you escaped to, but the ones you built with the person you loved, one day at a time, one moment at a time, one heartbeat at a time. The years continued to pass in a blur of seasons. James grew tall and serious, inheriting his father's skill with horses and his mother's love of learning. He talked about becoming a veterinarian, traveling to a proper university back east to study. Rose was spirited and creative, filling the house with drawings and songs, dreaming of becoming an artist. Young Thomas was still finding his way, but he showed early signs of his father's practical intelligence and his mother's gift for teaching. Vincent and Josephine watched their children grow with pride and wonder, giving them the freedom to pursue their own dreams while providing the support and love to make those dreams possible. It was everything they had promised each other that day by the stream, everything they had worked toward. When James turned 18 and announced he had been accepted to veterinary college in Denver, Josephine cried with joy even as her heart broke a little at the thought of her firstborn leaving home. Vincent, remembering his own departure from Texas and how it had ended, made James promise to come home for visits and to write every week. "I am not running away," James assured his father on the day he left. "I am running towards something, just like you taught me. And I will always come back because this is home. You and Mama made sure of that." Vincent embraced his son, tall and strong and ready to take on the world, and felt the last traces of his old guilt finally release their hold. He had not failed after all. He had succeeded in the most important way, by raising a good man who knew his own worth and had the confidence to pursue his dreams. Rose left 2 years later to study art in San Francisco, her letters home filled with excitement about the city and the ocean she had dreamed of seeing. Thomas decided to stay and help run the ranch, showing an aptitude for the work that pleased Vincent immensely, though he made sure his youngest son knew he was free to choose his own path if ranching was not his true calling. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Vincent hired a permanent foreman to handle the day-to-day operations, giving him more time to spend with Josephine. Her school had become an established institution in the valley, with several teachers now working under her direction, educating the children of ranchers, miners, and merchants who had settled in the area. On their 20th anniversary, Vincent took Josephine on a trip she had always dreamed of, to the ocean. They traveled by train to San Francisco, visiting Rose and spending a week exploring the city before continuing to the coast. The first time Josephine saw the Pacific Ocean, she stood on the beach with tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by the vastness and beauty of it. "It is more than I ever imagined," she whispered, gripping Vincent's hand. "You have earned this view. Vincent told her. "You have earned every good thing that has come to you." They walked along the beach as the sun set, two people who had found each other against all odds and built something extraordinary from their unlikely meeting. The years had added silver to their hair and lines to their faces, but they moved together with the easy grace of people who knew each other's steps by heart. "If I could go back," Josephine said as they walked, "back to that girl standing in the saloon with broken glass at her feet, do you know what I would tell her? What would you tell her? That the cowboy who walks through the door is going to change everything. That she should be brave, should take the risk, should trust in love even when it seems impossible. Because on the other side of fear is everything she has ever wanted." Vincent stopped walking and turned to face his wife, cupping her face in his weathered hands. "And if I could go back to that drifting cowboy who had lost his way, I would tell him that his life is about to begin. That the woman serving drinks with fire in her eyes is going to save him, give him purpose, show him what real strength looks like." They kissed as the waves crashed around them, 20 years of love and partnership and shared dreams flowing between them. The journey from that hot June night in Santa Rosa to this moment on the beach had been long and sometimes difficult, but neither would change a single step of it. They returned to Colorado renewed and refreshed, ready for whatever the future held. Rose eventually came home with a husband, an artist like herself, and they built a small studio on the edge of town where they created and sold their work. James completed his veterinary training and opened a practice in the valley, serving the ranchers and farmers who relied on their animals for their livelihoods. Thomas married a teacher from Josephine's school, a smart, kind woman named Sarah, and they took over more of the ranch operations. Vincent and Josephine became grandparents, watching with joy as their children built their own families. The house that had once been a small 2-room cabin was now the center of a sprawling family compound, filled with the sounds of grandchildren playing, of family dinners that went late into the evening, of love and laughter and life. As they grew older, Vincent and Josephine spent more time simply being together. They would sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains that had witnessed their entire life together. Sometimes they talked, sharing memories and dreams. Sometimes they sat in comfortable silence, hands clasped, needing no words to communicate a love that had only grown deeper and stronger with time. On a crisp October evening, exactly 30 years after they had wed in that small church in Telluride, Vincent and Josephine sat together, as they had countless times before. The aspens had turned gold, painting the valley in brilliant color, and the air smelled of wood smoke and the approaching winter. "You know what the best part of my life has been?" Vincent asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Tell me," Josephine said, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Every morning, waking up and realizing that yesterday was not a dream. That you are real, that this life is real, that somehow, impossibly, I got to be the one who stood up for you that night. I get to be the man who loves you, who built this life with you. That is the best part. Not a single moment, but every single moment." Josephine turned to look at him, her green eyes still bright despite the years, still containing that spark of wildness that had first caught his attention. "I used to dream of escape. I spent so many years staring out windows and imagining being anywhere but where I was. And then you gave me that escape, made my dreams reality. But the real gift was not the escape itself. It was learning that the best dreams are not about running away from something, but about running toward someone, toward love, toward partnership, toward a life built together." "No regrets?" Vincent asked, though he knew the answer. "Not a single one," Josephine confirmed. "Well, Except maybe that I did not drop those glasses sooner so we could have had even more time together." Vincent laughed, the sound rich and warm, and pulled his wife close. Below them, the valley spread out in all its glory, dotted with the lights of homesteads and ranches, civilization growing but the wildness still present in the mountains and forests. Their grandchildren were playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Thomas and Sarah were walking hand in hand by the stream. Rose and her husband were visiting from town, their wagon pulled up by the barn. This was what they had built. Not just a ranch or a school or a family, but a legacy of love and courage and the belief that one brave choice could change everything. Josephine had dreamed of escape, and Vincent had made it reality. But together, they had created something far better than either could have imagined alone. As the stars began to appear overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first night together, their first kiss, their first promises, Vincent and Josephine sat together in perfect contentment. The saloon owner's daughter who had yearned for freedom, and the drifting cowboy who had needed purpose, had found each other in the chaos of life, and together they had built something eternal. Their love story, born in a moment of defiance and nurtured through years of hard work and devotion, had become the foundation for generations to come. And as they sat together watching the night sky, surrounded by the fruits of their love and labor, both knew that this was what happily ever after really looked like. Not a destination reached, but a journey shared, one sunset at a time.